The doorbell rings and there's a package. The package is not for you, but for your 8-year-old son. That's a surprise. But the next surprise is even bigger. In the package is an AK-47. Now, this is a true story. And this episode is all about how we educate our children in a digital world. My name is Lieuwe Jan Koning. Welcome to Threat Talks. And here from headquarters at Onto-It, we bring you the next episode. From hacker to hero. Let's get on to it. Welcome to Threat Talks. Let's delve deep into the dynamic world of cybersecurity. I'm thrilled to announce our guest of today. While I'm in the Netherlands, he is actually in New York in the United States. William McKeen, welcome. He is a former FBI Supervisory Special Agent. What it actually means we'll hear in a minute. And today he is a founder of the Redirect Project. And, well, we're going to talk about how children end up becoming a hacker, sometimes at a very young age. And what can we all do about this? William, more than welcome. Great to have you on the show. Do you have any children?
Yeah, not old enough to be a hacker yet, but a 4-month-old baby girl.
A 4-month. So when you're yawning, you're actually excused during this recording.
Thank you. It's
I can imagine.
It's the sleep-deprived phase of fatherhood, I think.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Good luck with that. So, like I said in the introduction, you were a former FBI agent. Can you tell us a little bit about what was your job? What did you do?
Yeah, I was in the FBI for 15 years. I spent almost all of that time in what the FBI calls the cyber division. And I was almost exclusively focused there on financially motivated cybercrime. So not our nation state actors, those folks who are engaged in kind of espionage campaigns, but cyber fraud and those people who really don't care who they're compromising. They just want to make as much money as possible. And so I spent most of my career in the FBI working on financially motivated cybercrime work.
Can you explain a little bit how that works? I mean, are you behind your computer all the time? Are you seizing servers in data centers? What was your day job?
All of the above, and any good FBI cyber agent will tell you that they spent a lot of time in the Netherlands too. So lots of good work that we did with the Dutch police there. But yeah, just about everything you've said there, working behind the keyboard to understand the crimes that are occurring online, but also understanding, since it's a financially motivated crime, like where the monetization point was for those bad activities. So if I'm compromising a computer system to make money, where's that money actually flowing? And even though it sounds like big, scary ones and zeros, it's actually a lot more about following dollar signs and euro signs, right? Where is that money ultimately going? Because that's the motivation behind what the bad guys are up to. So I spent most of my career working out in what I think the world would call the field, right? I was out interviewing people and investigating and working in liaison with companies, and that's really what gave me kind of the window into understanding how cybercrime really impacts people and the understanding of the companies and the people who are affected by those kind of hooded faces behind the keyboard with the binary code scrolling behind them. Like what was actually happening with those keystrokes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I can imagine it's sometimes difficult because when you start investigating a crime, you don't know where and in what jurisdiction this person is. Correct? I can imagine this is hard. I mean, it's easier to try to get a bank robber like a physical one, right? Because that person probably is close to the actual bank, right? But now they could be indeed in the Netherlands or maybe in nations where there's no real good collaboration. I can imagine a hacker from Russia, for example, is going to be difficult.
Think about trying to solve the Louvre art heist without having a video of the bad guys actually leaving the museum, knowing the license plate of the car that drove them away, and having the security footage in almost any major city showing you their exact path that they've gone on, right? These are folks who planned that crime for years and they were caught yesterday, right? Caught within a couple weeks of the act. What we have here is just those digital fingerprints that we're trying to use to peel back all of these layers of obscurity and figure out really who is behind the keyboard and who's doing these cyber crimes.
And do you have to sometimes also try to get into their systems? It's perfectly fine if you cannot say anything like that. I could understand, but does that also work sometimes that you go try to approach them to gather more evidence, for example?
I think a lot of people will see cybercrime and say, oh, that must be so different than any other type of crime you work. But ultimately, it's still a person behind the keyboard. And what What the FBI did better than anyone else when I was there was recruiting those people who are inside the network to be able to work with you, to give you that insight. You can have all kinds of obscurity and VPNs and proxy servers, but if I've got somebody working for me who's inside your criminal enterprise, none of that helps prevent me from finding out who you are, right?
Yeah, we actually hear that a lot. We did episodes on the maritime industry, for example, and they have an issue because you never know who you're actually hiring. And of course, we've seen Manning and Snowden, for example, different things. People you have screened, and you can use this mechanism to your advantage as the FBI. So that helps you a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have a few examples of really young kids from time to time. I mentioned one in the introduction. Someone who got AK-47 delivered. You have a ton of these examples how things at a surprisingly young age sometimes are really, really savvy and do the craziest things. Can you give us a few examples of things you've encountered in your career?
Yeah, I think the working financially motivated cybercrimes took me to West Africa. It took me to Eastern Europe. I worked cases on folks from Southeast Asia. Those are not surprising places to hear that there was a financial cybercrime coming from. But in the last few years of my career, we found that the call was actually coming from inside the house, right, to use a movie quote, and that the bad actors that we were seeing engaged in incredibly sophisticated cybercrimes were children. They were teenagers, and they were US-born citizens just going to school every day and coming home and engaging in incredibly sophisticated cybercrimes. So I can talk about a 17-year-old who hacked Twitter and caused an untold amount of chaos there within the company. They still recognize it as one of the biggest cyber intrusions in the history of a social media company. There was a 16-year-old from Australia who hacked Apple. And Apple spent months trying to figure out how to get this guy out of their systems. And it turns out he was just motivated because he wanted to one day get a job at Apple. And even in January of this year, a 15-year-old who got his start in hacking or computer intrusions by trying to hack into the Italian Ministry of Education so that he could change his grades. And this is, this is Ferris Bueller, right? For the 1980s movie of hacking into the school to change your grades. That didn't cause enough harm for any law enforcement response. But a few months later, when he chose to hack into the navigation systems for ships in the Mediterranean, that got some people's attention. And so you think about a 17-year-old doing something to a major social media company, a 16-year-old hacking one of the biggest and most secure companies in the world, and a 15-year-old having ships go out of control in the Mediterranean. And then to your point at the top, right, we have an 8-year-old who successfully purchased an AK-47 online. That was some of the most...
A fellow Dutchman. My apologies.
Yeah. He is a fellow Dutch, yeah. But what he's doing now, I think, is actually pretty cool, is he's helping, right? And that's what the theme of today is. He's helping people, helping other young people not make those same decisions. And I think that's where this is so interesting, is we have this population of young folks who are engaged in things that are world-shaking and industry-rattling cybercrimes that you would think are the exclusive remit of nation states or sophisticated organized crime groups. But instead, it's kids.
Yeah, but a single kid apparently bringing down these large organizations, and not necessarily because, the FBI is involved. You don't do that if you made a very stupid mistake or didn't forget to patch one single system. Those are advanced attacks, correct?
Yeah, they can be very advanced attacks, but in other instances, they're just calling in and socially engineering their way into companies. They're calling into the customer support desk and impersonating an employee to get credentials, or they're using a very, very clever known vulnerability that hasn't been patched, to your point. They don't have to be sophisticated to be devastating.
Yeah, so the FBI gets called when there's impact, right? It doesn't really matter, of course, how it's done. So you get involved when people are worried. I also understood that there was someone in Florida that changed the pH value, the amount of acid in the water, the drinking water system.
Was able
correct?
to gain access to the industrial control systems and change the you said, the pH level of the water supply. That's the kind of cybercrime that would make nation states envious, right? We have entire units of
If a
of hostile
17-year-old
regimes.
can do this,
Yeah,
we'd rather have this 17-year-old on board to make sure that cannot happen again.
absolutely right. And that's
Yeah.
one of the unique things about having a native U.S. English speaker involved in this is the problem is also the solution. For every one of these incredibly wow factor cyber attacks that they're engaged in, they can be rerouted or redirected to be a cyber defender, to be a cyber hero instead of a cyber criminal.
Yeah. Imagine you're a parent of one of these kids. Let's talk about that a little bit. I mean, how do they get there? You've been thinking about it a lot, investigating this. There is a reason or a mechanism, or apparently it's somewhat easy to get involved in, well, first of all, hacking, but then these kids also end up as part of criminal organizations even. Huh? Can you give us some insight on how that happens and how the kid's psyche somehow works? And makes him gets into a state that it's possible like this.
Yeah, it all starts with curiosity, right? It starts with puzzle solving. Our kids go online at an earlier age than our generations did, and they begin with playing games. Almost all of our future cyber criminals start as gamers, and that's not to say that gaming is a predictive factor to becoming a cyber criminal, but it's that first exposure to puzzle
solving.
solving.
Because we have to let go half of our staff, I'm afraid.
Well, and I would be a hypocrite too, because I've got plenty of time spent on games, but never became a cyber criminal, right?
Exactly, yeah. But it certainly helps to be tech savvy. That's where it starts.
I think that's exactly right. It starts with some of that tech savviness. It starts with that exploring and wanting to solve the puzzles of the game. And another big difference from our generation of gamers and the modern generation that we're seeing with this rise of teenage cybercrime is that it's community. When I grew up playing video games, I was playing those games by myself, or if I was playing with friends, they were sat next to me on another controller, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now, at the minute you become active on a game, you're meeting people, and people are finding you. It's not you seeking out community, that community's finding you. And just as likely as that's a good voice, a positive voice telling you all the wonderful, rich things you can do in cyber, we actually know that that's people who are using this for nefarious purposes. One of the things that I think would be unsurprising to parents is that you might encounter someone on there, as a young person, you might find someone on there who wants to exploit you. But what is a surprise is that there's someone on there who wants to work with you or offers you something tantalizingly valuable. Like, we think about Roblox, and I want 10 Robux so that I can buy the special thing for the game. And you go to your father and you say, hey, can I have 10 Robux? And being a very good parent, you say no. And that's usually the end of the conversation, right? If you're in a physical store, in the supermarket, in a department store, and your parents tells you no, you can't have the money to buy that thing, well, that's generally the end of it. But online...
So for those who are unfamiliar with Roblox, it's this big platform where people can offer sub-games, and it's a digital world basically, and lots of communication happens. You can get into different worlds. It's almost like Ready Player One,
yeah,
right?
It is the definition of choose your own adventure, right? It is not the traditional thing you think of if you think of a video game as being a single game you play, and maybe there's an open world within that video game. These are open worlds for you to then find games to play. And there's people there, and there are conversations you can have with them. You can meet community. There are amazingly rich and rewarding and wonderful things that can happen on the game. And that's where some of this discovery and interest in tinkering and experimenting and breaking things starts. And breaking things is hacking, but hacking isn't the bad word, right? It's cybercrime that's the bad word. Hackers are the way we made it to the moon. Hacking is the reason we're talking over a video call across continents, right? Hacking is a wonderful thing. It's becoming a criminal and using those hacking skills to harm someone else, to steal money, to engage in some sort of harmful activity that becomes the thing that we're trying to discourage, and instead use those hacking skills to be the reason why we're talking over a Zoom call and able to communicate and see each other in high quality video over the Atlantic, right? That's a wonderful thing that hacking brought us.
Yeah, but I mean, and if a kid is like 25 years old, their moral compass is developed, right? So then, well, if your education is not too bad, then probably they won't fall easily for these kind of things. But if an 8-year-old, I have an 8-year-old actually, and he wants to go to Roblox, and that's actually because his friend in school, she says, Daddy, it's almost 6 o'clock. I now need to go online because my friend is on Roblox as well. We meet up there. So that's a young age, right? So and yeah, maybe you're indeed. If I say no, I won't get you those credits. Because that's what you said. Eh? So someone else might be offering credits there. Roblox coins. What's the name of it?
There's Robux. Yeah. It's exactly right. The community that you can meet on there might be great. It might be your classmate from school, but it could also be a complete stranger from the other end of the world who is finding fertile ground for the recruitment of someone to help them in their schemes. You know, you asked me for a few examples. Another Dutch example from just about a month ago was 2 Dutch teenagers who were arrested for spying for the Russians. And they met their Russian agent on Telegram. So we think it could be the child predator. That's the one the parents are worried about. Could be Russian spies. It could be arms traffickers for the 8-year-old who bought the AK-47. Or it could be organized crime gangs that are on there who want to recruit you as someone who can help them launder some cryptocurrency or get access to a computer system for them so that they can make more money or steal some data. You don't know who you're talking to on the other side of that computer screen, right?
Do the kids know that it's the Russians? Is it like so much in disguise that they think they're doing a good thing? They believe they do the right thing, or do they actually understand and they're fine with it? Is it that far?
With all of these folks, it's the same kind of pattern that you see with terrorist organizations, with extremist groups, and with cybercrime gangs. It's the socialization to criminal activity, the desensitization to engaging in it, the reward kind of mechanism that says it is good for me to engage in this. I'm receiving positive feedback from this person who I see as a mentor or I see as someone to emulate. And once you have desensitized and socialized a person to that criminal conduct, now it's time to operationalize them and have a young person go do that thing. No one really joins a gang thinking I'm going to commit acts of violence in the name of the gang. They're joining for a sense of community. And it's exactly what's happening with these kids is they join for that sense of community. They join because this is a person who understands them or gets them or has the same interests as them. And once they're a part of that group, they desire to continue to receive that feedback of being a member of the group. And to do that, I start committing cybercrimes to prove my worthiness to this person or this group that I really want to value the relationship of.
Tie into the emotions then.
It's absolutely emotional.
Are you worried about AI developments? Because I can imagine right now that it may be a subset of all the people that are in Roblox or in Telegram or wherever it is. But in the rise of AIs, I mean, there can be like, it can be a 1 to 100 ratio, right? So for every real person, there's 100 fake ones. And we are quite capable, I think, especially those criminals, to make a bot trust you. We already see this in grown-up people fall for it, right? So that must be worrying for you as well. This thing, or do you think differently?
You'll have to bring me back for a whole nother episode to talk about my worries with AI. But yes, it is very concerning that young people won't be able to tell truth from fiction because we as adults are having a hard time with that, right? And it's not only that, but it's also the ability to exploit a young person who you're trying to cause some harm to or manipulate. Is now I can use artificial intelligence to make it look like you've done something you've never done. I now have the photograph or the video proof that this was something that I get to show your friends that you did. And even if it's fake, if it feels real enough, it can coerce a young person into doing something they might not have wanted to do online.
Yeah, it's we need to come up with new safety things, huh? At home, we've been talking about safe words, like you pose you agree on a password to validate that me as a parent, I'm actually the parent, right? But then also your child, if he wants to validate that you've said something, for example, you could say, "Oh, did you see what our parrot said yesterday? We don't have a parrot." And then parrot is my signal word, and I say, "Yeah, he said it was really great sunshine yesterday," something like that. And then you have established like an authentication. Do you think we need to train ourselves, both children and adults, to do these kind of things? Like I say, and we could do a separate episode of that.
I couldn't agree more that a safe word is great for kids to validate that the person that they're meeting in person, if my parents had this for me, if a person comes to pick you up from soccer practice or from camp and they don't say the safe word, you're not going with them. But can also work for companies. So that when the CEO is messaging the chief financial officer to say, "I need you to send this money right now," the CFO can say, "Ma'am, I'm not doing that until you tell me the safe word," because no AI will know the company safe word. It can be trained on this call, hopefully, right? Yeah. AI can be used to impersonate both of us, having had this long of an audio sample of us. But if it doesn't know that safe word, we're not sending the money. That kid's not getting in the car with that person. So yeah, it
real
is one
people
of the
authentication. We need to rethink this, huh?
Yeah, code word authentication. Yeah.
Yeah. On the subject of how children fall for this. So to summarize, they want to belong to a group. They're parents who are, well, with good intent, denying stuff for their kids. They can find the same stuff somewhere else, so that's what's appealing to them. Maybe not, their moral compass isn't shaped enough yet, so it's a bit more weak. Naturally, it's not the fault of the parents, of course. Any other mechanism that you're worried about, that you see in the real world, that play a role in this mechanism of children getting to the dark side?
What you've just said, I think, is exactly what parents need to know, is that I liken it to giving kids the keys to the car without driver's education. And a good friend of mine, Fergus Hay, who we'll talk about in a minute, who's one of the founders of the hacking games, says it great, that kids are learning coding in school, but not a code of ethics. And that's what's happening, is we have these digital natives, folks who have grown up online from a very early age. You have 3-year-olds who are surprised that the photograph hanging on the wall isn't a touchscreen, because everything is a touchscreen. Digital
fingerprints
natives
on the television.
Yeah, why the television should be a touchscreen, right? The digital natives that are being raised by digital immigrants, and that's not our parents' fault. That's not our fault for not understanding this world that our kids are getting into, but we need to understand it. We need to know what those questions are to ask about that online time.
So what can we do as parents? Let's what can we do in general? So let's first talk about parents, and we'll talk about what companies or organizations can do as well. But as a parent, you're concerned about this. You're concerned about Roblox. I mean, you can deny Roblox, for example. Is that a solution?
Yeah, you can try certainly the offline option, but I imagine you'll be met with quite a lot of resistance. And instead, we should accept that if our young people...
I would say even worse. You don't prepare your child for the world they're going to be in anyway.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. That by denying this reality of what is an online world, you may be doing a disservice for preparing your child for the future that will inevitably go online at some point. And so I think as a parent, I would encourage, be curious, ask questions, understand what they're doing online. If you left your 8-year-old on the playground alone for 4 hours, which I wouldn't recommend, but even if you did and you came back to pick them up, you would have an awful lot of questions about what happened during that time. Who'd you play with? Mm-hmm. What did you do? Did anything interesting or weird happen, right? We know how to ask those questions about in real life interactions that our kids engage in. So be curious. Be engaged, understand what games they're playing.
So I should ask my son, how was Roblox?
Yeah.
Who did you meet? Did you have fun?
To use the playground example again, if you think about a kid going out, and maybe it's not being left unattended, but they go to a party where they're going to spend time with a bunch of friends, and then they come back home and they're dropped off at home just in time for dinner. You would ask all kinds of questions about that party. But if instead your 8-year-old spent the afternoon on Roblox, would you ask any questions, or would you just think, oh, well, they were on Roblox this afternoon, and that's all I need to know. We're not asking those questions about and engaging with and understanding their life. You can ask, and I said, like, be engaged. Show me Roblox. Show me what's happening on here. Ask questions. I mean, that's just a parent being engaged and interested in the interests of your child, but it's also helping you learn a little bit and understand like what's going on up there in their brain and who are these people that they're talking to? What is this community? Is that a friend of yours that you talk to every day? What do you know about this person?
Why don't we do this already? Why is it not the second nature of parents?
I think that we see time spent on video games and the computer as dead time. It's just, that's the activity, is being on the computer. And if you remember 25 years ago, 30 years ago, that is true, right? I remember my father yelling from his home office, "No one get on the phone," because it would kick us off the internet, right? That's not reality anymore. That was a solitary event. To be on the computer, to play a video game, was to be spent by yourself or with a friend sitting next to you playing the game together. Now it is an entire online universe where you're meeting people, you're engaging with people that are from all over the world, and that can be wonderfully enriching. But it is something for us to be just as concerned about as well, right? Like, we would ask, who was at the birthday party? Who are you hanging out with this afternoon? What did you do? We should just ask the same questions about digital life.
Yeah, like you said, parents are digital migrants, and we need to understand the digital native world. Otherwise, we cannot. We don't live it. Huh? It's too unknown for us.
Yeah.
We should adapt.
Yeah, and so we should be curious. We should understand that thing. It's no different to me than just keeping up with the next generation's interest. We would do this when it comes to music. We would do this when it comes to entertainment, with art, with all other kinds of aspects of the culture around what a young person, our next generation, is experiencing online. We should just, or in their real life, all over, not just online, but we should really pay attention to what's happening there, because we know that that's the common kind of path, is the gaming, the activity online that then leads to some more dangerous and risky things, you know. And I used to say in the FBI, I want kids who never want to meet law enforcement to never have to meet law enforcement. You never want to have to meet a police officer because maybe you just don't like them, and that's okay. You don't have to like the police, and hopefully you never have to meet them. But if you keep going down the path of committing cybercrimes, that choice is going to get made for you, because to your point at your opening, the next knock at the door might not be the DHL package with the AK-47 inside. It might be the police coming to ask some questions about how you got that AK-47.
So you're talking about keeping kids on the right path and educating them on that. Can you tell me about the Redirect project that you're a founder of?
Yeah, thank you.
Everything to do with this, huh?
You know, my last few years in the FBI, I spent really, really focused on juvenile cybercrime and seeing that young people, and not just these anecdotes that I've shared with you, but really there's some studies that up to 80% of teenagers in New York City have either committed or been the victim of a cybercrime by the time they're 16. That's 80%. Wow. And when you think about cyberbullying, extortion, the other kinds of things that really can follow you home now as a young person, the need for young people to be educated and for parents to have a resource to go to understand those places that they need to learn about their kids are going to online. I recognized that there was a need for a central kind of organization that could foster these resources and really provide that mentorship for young people from the moment they're active online to the moment they get their first job in tech. And so I founded an organization we called the Redirect Project, and it kind of has that helpful little double meaning of a redirect request online, but also redirecting some of that behavior to kind of provide a central place for those resources. And we're a relatively nascent organization, just getting started earlier this year to build that central location for resources for parents as well as for justice-involved kids. And what I mean by that is like a young person who has found that they've committed a crime serious enough that the police have gotten involved. But, you know, this is a young person. They're 15, 16 years old, and kids need help, not handcuffs. That's when you become a 15-year-old who's now hacked the shipping lines in the Mediterranean. That's far more grand of a criminal conduct than I think a lot of people would think a 15-year-old capable of. but that's something that shows a level of creativity, curiosity, and skill that should be harnessed and rewarded. Certainly not the crime itself, but the interest in those things, and to be redirected in a positive direction so that hopefully we can turn a cyber attacker into a cyber defender.
I'm guessing that you don't want to wait until the police is at your doorstep and telling you that your son or daughter has done something bad online, right?
Well, yeah, that feels already too late, you know?
Yeah. So how does the redirect project then? How do you get in early then?
Well, at the risk of saying I'm just plagiarizing a bunch of good work that some Dutch folks are already doing, I am trying to bring over here to the United States some of the great work that's being done by a private company in the Netherlands and also by the Dutch police. So there's a company called HackShield that is a wonderful program for elementary school students to learn digital citizenship. And it starts with gaming, right? It's some amazing work done by some career professionals in gaming who have come up with this very engaging game that you play with your teacher at school. And you can play it by yourself online too, but HackShield's really designed to be played in class. And what a cool thing for a first grader to go into school and say, hey, today we're playing video games in class. And the kids actually get taught to know something about password security, to know about staying safe online. And they've seen dozens of examples of young people going home and telling their mom, like, hey, mom, you have a weak password.
I love it.
That's where we're starting early.
So it's you try to find a broad audience then. So you put it in schools. All kids should be there, right? So
and
prevention really starts at the beginning.
With what I call it all carrot, no stick, right? We're not punishing anyone for their desire to be online. We're showing them the wonderful, beautiful things about being online. When you want to see that as a positive thing. You don't want to immediately associate this with the bad activity that could happen. But let's highlight some of the wonderful things that you can do online. So the Redirect Project is actively working to try and bring HackShield to the United States. We currently don't have anything like this in the U.S. to train elementary school kids on their digital citizenship. And to your point about reaching kids before law enforcement gets involved, well, the Dutch police have a program called Reboot Camp that is for young people who have engaged in maybe some risky behavior. Think about that kid who hacked in to try and change his grades in Italy. And I see that happening all the time in the United States. High school aged kids who are finding a way to get into their school because you sometimes your first hack is often the hack It's the school, it's something in your community. And so when they engage,
very clear rewards.
Very clear reward, right? Now, even though it doesn't look like I'm doing my homework, my parents will see that I have great marks. Or as one
see,
kid,
Mom, I'm great. I don't have to do homework.
Well, a 14-year-old in the United States last year, not only did he find a way to change his own homework marks to make it look like they were completed, he started selling the ability to do it for anyone who was using the same homework curriculum management system. For about $25, he could mark your homework as completed for the week. And so young people were paying him quite handsomely for that.
And this guy is actually an entrepreneur. He should go to Silicon Valley and be mentored there and stick to the right path, right? Well, that's what you're after.
Absolutely. Is how do we take those energies? Because the Silicon Valley is filled with people who were teenage cyber criminals who just never got caught. There's a friend of mine who's a very successful CISO of a major company who, when he was 16, hacked the local telephone company and routed all of the toll-free numbers to his best friend's house as a joke. And that's a good one, right?
It's a good joke, yeah.
Thankfully, he found a different path into cyber and is now a very successful cyber professional. But if he would have been caught for that activity, that path could have been a path of the lifelong consequences of criminal justice involvement.
So what should we do with punishment then? If kids get into this, lured into this, either by someone online or by some reward to get their grades and they get caught, what should be the good response here from parents, from law enforcement?
Yeah, we have to recognize that someone was harmed here, right? So that can't be ignored. And we can't just say, hey, hack good enough and we'll find you into the recruiting pipeline of the Redirect Project or the hacking games or the Dutch police, right? So there has to be consequence, there has to be remediation, there has to be reconciliation. And to give credit to another Dutch program called Hack Right for first offense young people who commit a cybercrime, they do have consequences. They go to court, they plead guilty to a cybercrime, but they are then partnered with a private sector mentor for that period of supervised release, so probation instead of incarceration, where they learn what they did was wrong. They work on a project to help make the world a better place, a safer place. In one case, there was a young person from the Netherlands who was running a global denial of service campaign, and his punishment, if you call it that, was to spend 3 years working with a Dutch cybersecurity company to write a DDoS protection tool that the company could then use. And now that guy has a successful career in cyber, and I don't even know who he is, right? I just know his story. And that's great because he's not suffering these career consequences of something he chose to do when he was a teenager. I made a lot of bad decisions when I was a teenager, and I'm thankful that I'm not punished for those because I don't have the world find out about them because I've hacked the shipping lines of a company, or, there's a 17-year-old who hacked the transportation system for London. Like, those are the sort of world-renowned cybercrimes that these folks are going to be known for forever. So how do we reach these people before they become infamous so that hopefully they can become famous for being a cyber defender with those same skills?
Yeah, and being in the cyber business myself, I'm very much in favor of less hackers and more engineers that can fight the remaining hackers. So,
yeah. Well, and to give a plug for another organization that I'm involved with, it's called the Hacking Games, and the Hacking Games is doing just that. We are building a generation of ethical hackers to make the world a safer place, and we're also starting with games. So the Hacking Games will be launching the very first ethical hacker esports challenge coming up in the next few months, and that is to recruit young people who would be attackers to find those career opportunities in cyber, to become an engineer, to become a red teamer, to become a pen tester. You can do really destructive, cool, creative things online, but just you got to do it within the confines of what doesn't hurt someone else. You can be the first person to demonstrate how to hack a car and take it off the side of the road. That's already been done, but that was a hacker who did that, but he had permission from the car company to do it. And he's kind of famous for being the first person to hack a car, and that's pretty cool. And he didn't have to worry about his door getting knocked on by the police the next morning.
So there's a lot available. So if you're listening and you're in your car and you're like, I want to go to these, well, they're all in the show notes. So don't worry, when you get home, just look at them and all the links are in there. We'll make sure that they're in there. Great. So we talked about as a parent, how you would go. I have one more question about this. What if you suspect that your child is going the wrong way online somehow, but you're maybe personally not savvy enough, or you don't know, or you have a bit of a distance between you and he's really close to it. What would you recommend a parent to do?
Yeah, it's a really difficult question, right? And this isn't unique to cybercrime. We've experienced this for centuries of what do we do with our kid who seems like they're up to no good? What do we do with our kid who seems like they're going down the wrong path? And it is so important to try and engage with them, to understand what's going on there. And that was one of the, when I said to be curious, be engaged, but you also have to be skeptical, and you have to be willing to intervene in situations where you feel that things have gone awry, because that path is a very slippery slope that can go poorly really fast. And so I do think that parents just have to stay engaged. It's a fantastic question of what to do if that relationship is not one that feels open to those questions. But there's just such a potential. Pause and rephrase my answer here. What we see in comparing the way that young people in real life kinds of wayward paths go with our online is that it happens so much faster. From the time this person meets the wrong person online to the time they become a cyber criminal, commit their first cyber crime, is sometimes as often as twice or three times as fast as the same cycle would take if you were joining an organized crime group or a terrorist organization. And so it is truly, time is of the essence for parents to be engaged with their kid, to understand what's going on, and sometimes to take significant interventions into their life to ensure that they're not committing cyber crimes or being harmed online.
talk about it. Yeah, harmed online is another thing. I mean, you can also be extorted for sharing picture or anything. We've seen those as well. Yeah. So talk about it. Ask for help if you don't know how to handle with someone else. There needs to be a dialogue. That's what I hear you say.
There should definitely be a dialogue with your kid, with the other people in their lives. So teachers are often the first responders to see a change in a child's behavior because they spend more waking hours with our kids at certain points in their life than we do. So it's understanding those behavioral changes. It's also educating our educators to those warning signs of online harms, of being cyberbullied or cyber harassed and stalked. Because it's just as likely that a young person might be being harmed online as doing the harm. And I think, I would encourage anyone who hasn't seen the show Adolescence to watch, because it's based on a true story, right? A couple of true stories. And when you see how surprised the parents are to learn that their young person was capable of something like this, a 14-year-old boy, right? Was
It's a very intense series. I would recommend it to everyone, indeed. Yeah,
but because it lays.
But be prepared.
Be very prepared for how emotionally charged that show is, but also just how incredibly compelling and beautifully shot it is as well as a show.
Every episode is one single shot. It's amazing what they pulled off. It's a must see.
Absolutely agree. Yeah. And it's so compelling and so accurate for both parents and teachers to understand some of the reality of what our young people are getting involved in online, that it's being shown in every secondary school in the United Kingdom for free. It's being shown by the government to really help educate and highlight the nature of this. And so parents need to be aware. They need to understand some of the changes that your kid may exhibit. They might become more emotionally withdrawn. They might look for no apparent reason. They may appear depressed. They may begin wearing more concealing clothing because they could be harming themselves. I mean, there's some really obvious warning signs our parents need to look out for as well. They can find some of those. There was a public service announcement that was put out by the FBI in the spring that also includes some of the warning signs to be aware of for young people, both being victimized and doing the harm that parents should be aware of. But it is just staying curious and staying alert to make sure that you're protecting your kid from the realities of what it means to be active online.
Mm-hmm. Clear, yeah. We're almost out of time, but I have one question on behalf of organizations. What can organizations do to help? I mean, maybe with the Redirect project itself, but what? I mean, there's also talent in there, so maybe there's an angle there. What would you advise a company to do, or any organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think besides our code word for wire transfers that we talked about earlier, there's some great things that companies can do to get involved here. As you've mentioned, there's some great talent in here, and we talk a lot about the cybersecurity job gap. There's so many unfilled cyber jobs that these young people are perfectly placed to fill. They just need the encouragement and the guidance to go that path rather than the wrong. So companies can get involved with organizations like the Hacking Games, where we're building a recruiting pipeline for young people to find those cybersecurity jobs. You can partner with the Hacking Games to better, be involved in recruiting this, remarkable unconventional talent that is growing up right before us, that needs to find these jobs as outlets for that behavior and that excitement, and that how can I be the first one to hack a car? How can I help keep the school safe from cybercrime? Can grow up to how can I keep the company, how can I keep a country safe from cybercrime? Companies can also please reach out to the Redirect project, where we're building some of those resources. We are looking to bring Hack Shield to the United States, as I mentioned, and there's plenty of room for companies to get involved wherever they are in the world. The Hack Shield's now, I think, in 10 countries and growing, every day. So there's plenty of opportunities for companies to partner with some of the work that's being done here to help educate young people, but also to help eventually hire some of these young people so that they can solve what is the second or third largest economy in the world, right? Cybercrime. And we're going to need more and more defenders for this every year to help solve the cybercrime crisis.
Well, thank you very much for putting the ethical in ethical hacker at a very young age.
Yeah, that's the plan, right? Let's give kids the opportunity to see themselves as a cyber hero and not as a cyber attacker. So I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It was great to be here.
Well, thank you very much for all the insights you've given us and all the pointers that we can actually start to work with from tomorrow.
Thank you so much.
William McKeen, thank you so much. And for our viewers, thank you very much for tuning in. If you like this episode, please press the like button. There's also a subscribe button, which means that the next episode is also in your inbox. You can also put the bell, and that will mean you even get a notification if you don't want to miss any episodes. Thank you for tuning in this time. Hope to see you next time. Goodbye. Thank you for listening to Threat Talks, a podcast by Onto It Cybersecurity and AMS-IX. Did you like what you heard? Do you want to learn more? Follow Threat Talks to stay up to date on the topic of cybersecurity.